Art Chat TV is brought to you by Linda Fisler Fine Art. Visit her website.
Welcome to today's Art Chat, everyone. My name is Sarah Alspaugh. I'm the online community manager here in the Fine Art Department at F&W Media. And I just want to thank everyone for joining us today for Simplicity, One of the Basics Often Forgotten with Linda Fisler and her guest, Quang Ho.
Hi, Quang. How are you doing?
I'm great, thank you. Thanks
Great.
for
Welcome to our listeners as well. So we have a good size audience out there today, Quang. So I'm sure that we'll have some questions here for you at the end. And this is a really important topic, I think, as well. But I just wanted to make a couple announcements, and then we'll move right into the discussion. One of the things is I just got back literally from a 25-mile bike ride, and one of the things, and this is a pedal bike, not a motorbike, I was looking for really kind of wonderful locations for a fall workshop that I might be doing, and I found some wonderful barns and picnic scenes by a river that would be cool to set up and things like that. So we'll have some more information coming up on that in the fall. But and I know you have family in this area, Quan, and I know,
yeah.
Yeah, and you know, it's amazing the difference you get when you're going down a bike path here in Ohio and you're going, wow, that'd be a great place to paint, and that would be a great place to paint. I found so many neat places down here, and I know that you know this area as well, and it's really, really nice. And by the way, I have to tell you this before I forget, Weatherwax closed.
I heard that.
Yeah, so
That's sad, so sad.
yeah, but if you do come back this way, there's another golf course that I know you'll like really well that we used to be members of, and we can get you on there to play. So
Cool.
that was one of our discussions, I guess, that we had over at Indy, is how much that Juan liked playing Weatherwax. He plays golf. So yeah, and then basically the only other thing I wanted to mention is that this is Juan's second talk with me. Our first one was The Evolution of Seeing, which was, I thought, a really wonderful talk, and that is available out on my website, lindafisler.com. Go to the Art Chat library and just kind of scroll down, and you'll see The Evolution of Seeing, and we talk about a number of artists, all the way from, I think we started back with Rembrandt and moved forward, talked about Turner a little bit, and how with almost each century, or with each one of these people, you could actually see how seeing and painting had changed through that. And that was, I found that conversation with you really interesting, and I know
Yes, that was
that,
fun.
yeah, it was, and you know, learned a lot from that. So I know, you know, I'm really kind of excited about getting into simplicity here and talking about that, because you do have some very unique things that, you know, that you bring to this, and that's one of the reasons why I enjoy talking with you. Is I guess, you know, we talk about some really cool things. So with that, if I say the word simple or simplicity to you, Quan, and it can mean a number of things. We can talk about simplicity in a number of different areas, and I'm sure we'll get into that. But what do you think of when I say simplicity?
Well, you know, interestingly, I think for as long as I've painted and digging into painting and learning how to paint, what it comes back to all the time is exactly that: simplicity. The beauty of a painting is in a very simple structure. It's like this really wonderful, simple groundwork that allows you to be as expressive as you want to, with color and paint quality and edges and all of that on top of it. And so what I mean by simplicity is being able to see, taking the total picture and simplifying it to its core, and understanding why that is so beautiful. And so, in a sense, getting rid of all the extraneous details that get in the way, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And that takes some keen observation, some keen understanding about what you're looking at. And so I don't know what you have on the screen for my paintings, but you'll see there's a scene of a snow painting of Cherry Creek near Denver, and it looks absolutely chaotic and complex. But before I started that painting, I could see just the few simple patterns that are required to lay all the details on top. You see.
Right.
And so the structure of it is really just the shadows, where the shadows go and where the light go. Essentially, it's a light and shadow painting. So that's the simplest structure there is the pattern of where all the shadows are and where all the lights are. And in the shadow and the light painting, that's all you have is either in the light or in the shadow, not something in between at all. There are transitions maybe, but for the most part, even the transitions belong either in the light or in the shadow. So that's the structure for that painting. And then what's the next set of simple structure? So it might be the snow versus the dark pattern of the river, which then is also connected to the dark pattern of the trees. They're similar in value. So I'll group all of that together as one thing, separated from the snow, you know? So that's how my mind thinks in terms of how do I simplify things down to their barest essence and getting that absolutely perfect before I lay any color down and before I think about laying down any paint down. I have to see that perfectly. Does that make sense?
It does to me. In I know that you've been actually thinking about and exploring the limited color and the limited values and well, I should say actually minimal colors, not limited, because you use all the colors, but
right.
Particularly in this this particular landscape one, you know, I always, when I teach, I always try to teach even my newest students to understand value and using minimal values, and then playing up color relationships and playing up you know, light and dark shadow areas like you've done in this. I think that to me comes back to being where the strength of the painting is.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes, absolutely. And I'll go into these glazing thing in 1 second. That Cherry Creek snow painting is actually done direct. I mean, very direct painting, no glazing at all. But if you go down to there's another set of images
This was
that I
plein
sent
air,
to
right?
you.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
Quan. This was plein air? Yeah.
Well, part of it is, not
Part
all
of
of
it.
it.
Okay.
It's pretty big. It's 24 by 36, so you can only do so much before the wind and the sun and everything changes. So I do much of my work in the studio.
Yeah, and I just want to also talk about a little bit about here too. When you were thinking about this painting, when you were actually painting it, you weren't thinking, oh, you know, and this is what I mean by simplicity too, is, you know, oh, there's this branch that lives here and there's this leaf that lives here. You're not thinking that way at all. You're thinking of there's this gorgeous shape back here that lives in the light, and there's this other gorgeous shape over here in the shadow where, you know, we're looking at and reads to us as tree trunks. To you, we're thinking shape, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yes,
and
yes, I do. I obviously, intuitively, you know that there are branches and snow and this, that, and the other, but that's not how I think when I put it down. I'm purely seeing abstract shapes. I see
okay.
what the dark, how the darks relate to the lights, first of all, and then as a branch, instead of saying it as a branch, I note what value it is, what shape it is, how does it sit next to the other values around it, and more importantly, what other values is it connected to, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, nothing is ever separated. When I look at one spot, I immediately think about what value is that? How is it connected to all the other values in the painting? You see what I mean? So I never isolate anything when I look at it singularly. I always see it bigger. Yeah.
Right.
So, but
Okay.
there's another, to go back to your point about the importance of drawing and values.
Yes.
Just since Christmas, really, after the new year, I have been on a crazy search, kind of a play for me with glazing, which I've not done before. And glazing or griselle or they, it's an old master's technique. And just last week I was in Washington, D.C. I did a demo for the National Portrait Society's annual meeting, and I took the opportunity to go 3 days and hung out in the Smithsonian, and just devoured the paintings. And I realized, studied them very carefully, and I realized from about 1300 to 1800, all the artists were using this technique. Basically, they just painted an underpainting with very limited amount of color, sometimes no color at all, just black and white, sometimes black and white with a little umber. And they build this very finished, beautifully drawn, beautifully toned, all the edges you want, sharp where you want it, and then they let that dry, and then they use mediums, glazing mediums. For example, Merge is what Rembrandt, mixtures of Damar varnish, linseed oil, some turpentine. There's so many different kinds of medium that you can dream up. But so they would simply let the painting that painting dry, and then glaze color on top of it in thin layers, almost translucent, just thin layers, building it up. And I tried it. My first one, I spent about 4 hours on the black and white umber image, and it took me 30 minutes to glaze it. It went from black and white to full color in 30 minutes. It blew me away. It really was amazing. Like, how did I not learn about this before? And I'm kind of glad I didn't, though, in a sense, because it would have made me, I can imagine, just being so allured by it that I would never have explored all the other things that I explored.
Right.
But to me, this is a great tool. So you'll see there's an image of a figure that I sent you floating in the air.
Yes, Sarah's working to get that.
And so that image
right there
was done with just, this is what my underpainting would do. Now I can take this to a much more finished state. So this was, I just stopped and actually took a photograph of this. And then I went ahead and worked the color up from this, and it's a much more finished painting. But this is a series of paintings that I've not shown anyone yet, so you're really the first one to see it. Of figures and gravity and water that I'm doing. And I've worked on it for 2 years, really trying to figure out, how do I approach this subject? How do I approach painting these paintings? And I've gone from very direct, really thick paint to painting it all in and scraping it all off, putting it back on, to this, which is glazing, painting a black and white painting and then just glazing color on it. And I'm having such a great time with this. I'm getting close to knowing how to do it. And but I wanted to show you the audience this to give you a sense of how far you can go with a black and white painting. And I'll tell you what's so great about this process is as long as I've been teaching, the one thing that gets in the way of a young artist learning to paint is color. The color, because they don't understand value and drawing and edges well enough, the color just totally gets in the way. So this process, you throw color out entirely, and it brings your focus entirely back to drawing values and edges. And you see that there is a tremendous amount of room for exploration. And if your painting goes badly, it's usually at this stage anyway, not the color.
Exactly.
So this is where you can just forgive yourself or give yourself the permission to not deal with color. And then once this is dry, here's the beauty about this. When you glaze color on, you're literally, it's almost like a sensitive coloring book. You've got the drawing down, you're layering these thin layers of color on, and as the thinner the more you thin the pigment with the medium. And speaking of the glazing medium, there's liquin, there's Neo Melgib, it's called. There's Alkyd, Galkyd Light. There are all these glazing mediums that you can go to the art store and buy, and all of them will work. They just have different consistency, so it depends on your choice about that. But for me, I've tried them all, and I haven't figured out which one I like the best yet. Merge is really wonderful, but it's more toxic, and it has a nice body to it.
Quang, have you tried any of Michael Harding's mediums?
I tried Michael Harding's paints, and they're wonderful, but I haven't tried the mediums yet. No.
Okay.
Like I said, I've just started this since December, so I'm just grabbing the closest thing I can.
Yeah, I actually have a jar of his mediums. I think you'd love them. So Just a
Oh, I'm
hint there.
sure.
Drop Michael a note.
Oh, I love Michael's. But what Michael does is fine art in itself. He does
Yeah.
a beautiful job with his paints, and he supplied me with a number of tubes, and they're so vibrant and they're wonderful. So I've got to try his medium too.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
you know
And they say hi, by the way.
oh, good. So,
Go ahead.
so the thing to do, the only way, I looked on the internet, looked for any clues, but what taught me the most was after playing with this process for about 3 months, and when I went to the Smithsonian's, it was so revealing. Interestingly enough, we talked about Turner a minute ago.
Right.
Turner's really beautiful atmospheric paintings, thick and juicy, I thought. I thought they were really thick, juicy passages of paint. The one in the Smithsonian, when I stood next to it, it was all glazes. It blew me away. Now, this
Wow.
might be crazy. So that means that when you look at the painting, he built it up with just black and white and gray and I don't know if there's even umber, but the paint was thick at that stage. All the colors were like watercolor washes on it. All of the colors.
Wow.
And it was amazing. What a revelation. Like, what the? Yeah, so, I learned a lot.
Because, I start black and white, doing basically what you did here, I try to do as well. And I always tend to keep it thin at that stage, which now you're telling me that's something I shouldn't do. I shouldn't limit myself to that.
Exactly. It's not that you shouldn't do it, but what interests you. By the time Rembrandt got a hold of this process, Vermeer was doing it really thinly. Rembrandt would paint. At that point, he didn't have to just paint black and white. He would paint with reddish umber and all of that too. And he would build up his underpainting and then glaze it and then paint back on top of the glaze with color and all that, and then glaze that again. So it's not a one pass thing. You can do it as many times as you want to. And then by the time I got to the 1800s, you see Thayer and Sargent in his earlier years. Thomas Wilmer Dewing was using glazing to over all of his that's how he got those beautiful harmonious colors. And but that's for exploration. When I gave the talk to the Portrait Society in front of like 800 people, this is a funny story. The year before, I was doing the same demo, and somebody from way in the back yelled up, "What color did you just use for that?" And it took me by surprise, and I didn't really answer it very well. I just held up my palette and pointed at it. But this year, I said, somebody asked me that, and I've been thinking about for a year how to answer that. So the question is, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You can throw me any colors, and I'll make flesh tone out of it. It's the values that's important. And so color is for exploration, not something to be afraid of that you're doing it wrong. It's the values and the edges and the drawing is where you should focus on so that you can explore the color. So that's why I love this glazing method, because it allows you to get that first part right, and then I can explore it however I want to. I can learn about color. I can learn about, so many different ways to do it. I can go thick. I can go thin. I can go opaque-ish washes. I can go thin washes. But it's really amazing how quickly you can get a result. Can you go to the next one? What's the next one there, Sarah? Is there a reclining figure? Let's see what image is next. What do you see there, Linda?
There's a lady that is, if you want to say foreshortened, basically head up towards the top of the canvas.
Yes.
Feet down towards us. Yeah.
So that one, I was painting this painting with a very thin underpainting, and literally, this at this stage it has one pass of glazing over it. But so you can see in the top right corner there's some umbers, some reddish umber, and then over top of that I worked the white and black and a little bit of greenish umber into the flesh tone and the shadows.
It's a
And
fetching color.
oh, is it? I don't know that.
Yeah, I mean go ahead.
But anyway, you can really build up the forms and the light and the shadow, and I'm using thick white in some areas and really translucent in other areas. But the color is very laid back, is pushed back. And then with the glazing, I threw in some of the warm pinks and skin tones that you see in the leg and the shadow,
Mm-hmm.
and around her lips and the face. I just threw in just a little bit of color in there, and immediately it started to come to life. And then
Mm-hmm.
later on, I actually glazed some warmish yellow-orange over the skin tone in the light area. And it was so much fun to explore this. But this painting feels very expressive and loose, and at the same time, it was done without any color at all.
Yeah, it's marvelous.
And then you can, I can explore edges this way better too, because I don't have to worry about color. I can really play with some other things.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting too, the discovery that folks make when they start going into establishing what I call establishing a value plan, or working with just light to dark, black and white. First,
Mm-hmm.
is everybody thinks that oh, it's not fun to do that. I just want to get past this stage. But if you really take time and start playing with that, it is a lot of fun. I mean, it's just, you almost get to the point where it's like, who needs color? Let's just go back to black and white. But
Yeah, yeah. I think that you would learn so much by doing just that. Just see how much you can do with black and white. Give yourself that one assignment, because that forces you to be really sensitive to values, value relationships and edges. And if you can be good at that, oh, your color will be just, the colors will
yeah,
be so much stronger. So, I
right.
mean, just give yourself that assignment. The next one is I think it might be the reclining figure with her head off down the bottom there, with her hands together, sort of.
No, that was go the other way, Sarah. That was the one that you hit on. Okay, is their head laying over a bench
Sort of like,
on the
yeah.
right?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that one I approached a little differently than the last one, which was done very thinly. This one I approached this painting very thick impasto paint, but again with very little color. So
Mm.
I actually used a little yellowish something in the skin tone as I was laying down. So I went ahead and added just a little smidgen of color. It doesn't matter what. The point of it is I didn't worry about color. I just added a little bit of whatever I felt like, but
Mm-hmm.
keeping the values correct. So I went ahead and did this painting, and then I glazed in the skin tones later and really bring it up to um, a little bit more. And I think the next photograph shows me adding a little bit more to the skin tone. You can see the half tones on this figure, a little greenish in the shadow, and a little warm in the shadow too. So this painting again started out without any color, and then I added a little glazing to it, and with just so little, it became more and more. And I can keep adding color until it becomes just full of color and as vibrant as I want. And next time you go to one of those major museums, really study some of those old masters. This is exactly what they did. Vermeer, all of them, they did all of this. Da Vinci too.
Do you think that they were doing it because they had to mix their own pigments? So it kind of limited them a little bit more. I mean, once the tube colors came out and the tubes of paint came out, we kind of changed the way that we painted.
Yeah, I don't know. I would guess that has to do something with it too. But I think that artists, I mean, if you look at Rembrandt's later work, he was more and more interested in the paint quality itself over the effect of what the paint was doing for light and shadow. So he was becoming an impressionist, whether he liked it or not. So, which eventually, I think he would have just played with pure color and not worry about glazing at all.
Mm-hmm.
But earlier on, he was trying to create this mood, this illusion of shadow and light. And so that is best achieved by glazing, I think. I mean, I can paint a direct painting and you know, impasto and all of that, and still get the feel of shadow and light if I get my edges and value and color just right. But with
Right.
glazing, it allows me to get the values and edges just right the first time, not worry so much about color, and in the later passages I can add color to it. Um, so it gives me a little more freedom is all. It's just an great extra little tool to use, and it gives you a little bit of breathing room, um, mainly.
Yeah, we're so used to having such gorgeous color from you. Would you consider these figures that you've done? I know that you're doing this for your own exploration and study, but would you ever go back and add more of those wonderful colors that we usually see from you?
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, no. This is just a little passage right now for me
Okay.
to see what it feels like to me, what it looks like,
Right.
what can I get away with and what I can't. So like I said, color is for exploration. The
Hmm.
process is not. Process. I think technique and style and all of that is really cheap in the end. If you use too much, if you rely too much on it, it becomes like a crutch, and I don't care much for that. But but it's a it's a process of learning what I'm learning effects. I'm learning what happens if you do this, what happens if you do that. So in the
Right.
end, the bigger bowl of tools I get to play with, the richer my painting will be, hopefully. But yeah, already I'm starting paintings now that I'm glazing with more color, and then it's funny because I did like 30 of these in a row, and then I immediately went on a super bright, high chroma, thick painting just to break out of that, and that's just how I do it. And then I go back to this and bring some of that with me, and then bring some of this over to the thick impasto thing. So yeah, it
Right.
all kind of intermingles somehow, which is fun.
Yeah, and a lot of the little studies that you've done, I went out and hung out with a lot of the folks that are Atelier School during the Representational Art Conference out in California, and these really do look like you are studying in an atelier and the type of works that they do
Hmm.
to really build their skills up and have an understanding of color and I was talking with one of the students and she was saying, oh, I've been working in black and white for 3 years, and she was at actually at Michael's table. We were sitting there talking, and she said, now she goes, I'm scared to death to go into color because I just love this black and white so much. I don't want to go ruin it with color. And I was just like, wow, that's like a
Oh,
totally different place than where I came in, naturally
yeah,
starting with color and not starting with black and white. So I mean, I can't, I was sitting there in awe of her going, I can't imagine just painting in black and white for 3 years. How did you do this? So
yeah.
interesting conversation.
Well, for me, that's a very important point in all of this is that afraid is not acceptable.
Right.
Being afraid to ruin a painting is not acceptable. You're not going to learn crap if you're afraid. And then when I teach a workshop, inevitably I'll come to a painting and I'll see something and like, and I ask the student, why aren't you doing this or that or the other? And they'll say, well, I'm afraid if I did that, it'll ruin this. And they just pull that out of nowhere. I'm like, how? No, if you're afraid of it, that's the first thing you need to do.
Yep. Yeah, we had
Put it in because I can tell you whatever you're afraid of, you're going to be wrong about that.
yeah.
So so to do 3 years of black and white painting, oh my gosh, she's going to so love the color if she allows herself to just go into that. You know,
She is.
she's going to
She
love
is.
it. And
Yeah.
I've, the whole, what I'm trying to show here for the audience is an experience I'm having with it, and hopefully they can take it and explore it on their own. The point
Mhm.
here is that value, edges, and beautiful shapes, or drawing, which is the same thing, is so important in a painting. Is where most paintings go wrong. Is not the
Mhm.
color. Is not the
Right.
color. the colors go wrong. If the colors go wrong, it's probably because the artists aren't experienced enough to know that there's values associated with color,
Mm-hmm.
and so they inevitably will get the value wrong.
Yes.
And when they're messing around with color. So um, the next image, Sarah, I think is a little. You can see my thumb on the painting.
Oh,
I
nope,
was.
I'm fetching.
It's a little head study of a young man with a black cap on. Can you see him?
She's looking.
Okay. I was painting in a.
There we go.
Yeah, I was painting a live model in a group here in Denver, and and then I looked across the room with like 15 minutes left in the session, and I saw Joel painting across the room. He's this beautiful black man, beautiful dark skin tone, and I pulled out this little 5x7 canvas and did a tonal painting of him, and I just did all of this in about 15 minutes. And I was going to glaze on it, and then I thought, no, I like it just like that.
Yeah.
And then I gave it to Joel. But anyway,
Aww.
but it would
That's
be
nice.
so easy to take this, you see, and just glaze color over it. Even with his dark African American skin, with all the beautiful browns and blues, and it would have been easy to glaze on top of that, and it would just really bring that to life. So
Yeah, lots of movement.
Lots of movement. The edges are there. The sharp edges, like the sharp edge on the eyelash, on the top of his forehead, that's sharp. But the rest of it, it's just accurate drawing. And the soft edge around the beard, the soft edge in the shadow from the cap onto the face. All those things. You don't have to worry about color when you do that. You just have to worry about values and drawing, and then you can really play with edges. Let this dry, and then you glaze the thin layers of color on there, see what happens.
Let that dry. Isn't that like, sacrilege?
It is. Oh, I hate to.
We have to work wet into wet. Come on, Quang.
Yeah, I know. Well, see, I've given that idea up because living in Denver is so dry that if I do a thick painting like this tomorrow, the next day, most of it is dry, except for the highlights. And it drives me crazy because I love painting wet into wet. And I've tried everything from poppy seed oil to whatever, but I'm going to have to move into a freezer, so the paint will stay dry, wet for me. But
have you tried walnut oil?
I've tried all of that.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, Denver is just too darn dry.
Okay.
What was I going to say about this that I forgot to mention? The glazing bit is really a lot of fun. So when you go on the internet and go on YouTube, there are people who give you little hints of this, how to do it, and which is all great, but you need to explore it on your own to really figure out different ways of doing it.
Yeah, and it is, and you don't necessarily have to do figures. I mean, you could set up a still life and use the same approach in a still life. If you want to try to just, I guess the ultimate and more interesting one would be to go out with minimal colors and try to paint a still life, or not still life, a landscape plein air, huh?
Well, you could.
Oh, I think you could.
Yeah, absolutely. Or try, when you're in plein air, try to get the values as close as you can, and give yourself room with color. Don't worry about color so much. Just make sure you get the value right, and some of the coloration as close as you can.
Yeah.
And then go a little bit lighter in the light, because you remember when you glaze, you're going to make the light a little bit darker, so it'll go a little darker. And then you can go back on top of that with lighter, and then glaze that back again. The point that I was trying to make is that the beautiful part about this fun part is, with this painting or any other painting, if you like the black and white result, and it's dry, you glaze on it, and if you don't like it, you can wipe all that off and start again.
Yeah, because it's dry.
It's dry. Yeah, it's really great. But I'll tell you, you're talking about still lives. I don't know if your audience and you know who Fenton Latour is. But Fenton Latour is one of my favorite still life painters, and I was mystified. How in the world did he get those beautiful background colors? He glazed. I finally, you know, it was like cracking open the secret code to all of this. He glazed. I totally understand how Rembrandt did it now. I totally understand how Fenton Latour did his paintings. It's not a mystery at all now. It wasn't, they didn't get it right the first time. That's the whole point of it. You know, they got the drawing and all, but the values, the glazing, they could control the values even more in the glazing process. They control the color, the mood of the painting. They hide things away with glazing. They bring other things out with glazing. It's fantastic.
Yeah, it's interesting because like you're sharing a little bit of the process that got you to this, and one of the ways that got me to start with just the black and white was when I was doing a lot of study of Fetchin and Sorolla and Monet and a number of other people, and I would always take their paintings and switch it to black and white on my computer and count how many values that they had. And I'm sitting there thinking, well, you know, if they're doing what they're doing with their great skill and still managing to keep it to 3 to no more than 5 typically values, then there's got to be something to this. So I started actually, you know, okay, we're going to limit everything to 3 to 5 values, and that's why one of the reasons why I just decided that I was going to start painting that way was because that gets me, I can put any color I want inside that value, and it's, you know, like you were saying, edges, composition, you know, all of that is taken care of and thought of, and then you can just have so much fun with the color as long as it's in the value range that you're putting it in, the value area where you're putting it in. You can have so much fun with color, and it's all you get so much thought of and thought out first by doing it that way.
Absolutely, and that comes back to our original discussion about simplicity, because all the great painters from Feshin to Monet to Degas, Sargent, they all saw that simple structure, and that's why they could take this chaotic landscape and simplify it to its essence. Sometimes I only see 2 values, sometimes 3, most times 3. You know, in order for value to be feeling a dialogue of rich value relationship, you need at least 3 value big shapes, and then you build other ones inside of that. So yeah, so that brings us back to that original point that I was making, that for all these years of painting, when I started painting, I have to like the simple structure. It doesn't matter what I paint. I have to like that abstract, simple play between the first couple of shapes. And if one is too equal to the other, they draw attention away from each other. But if you work one dynamically against the other so they speak beautifully, then I know I can't fail in that painting. It doesn't matter what I do to it, I'm not going to screw it up. And it's an interesting point, actually, but it really is true for me.
Right.
You know, I mean, whatever internal drawing and structure, detailing that I put inside of those simple structure, if they're beautiful, I can always change the detail, but the beautiful structure will always remain.
Right. Yeah, and it's the other point that I was thinking of when you were talking was Ansel Adams and his black and white photography, and what always makes his photography so strong in black and white was a lot to do with his compositions that he chose, because he was very strong in composition naturally. And you know, every once in a while, the way that he would focus and not focus on a specific thing, you know, that also helped too. So even in photography, when you're talking about black and white, it's a lot of the same principles that we're talking about, that simplistic thing. And don't be afraid to edit. Don't be afraid to take something out. You know, there's that word again, fear. But
yeah,
you know, it's like, oh my gosh, this thing is in front of me. I have to put it in my painting, and it's like, no, you don't.
No, well, you know, you have to know what context it falls in.
Exactly.
There's if you move your eye around to everything in front of you, that thing becomes the focal point. But if you shift your eye from that thing to another thing, then that thing no longer is the focal point. The next thing is. So you have to be discriminating and understanding how all of those things fit together and not just, mindlessly wander around in the painting.
Yeah.
So the power to edit, this is what separates the differences between artists, and that's what makes you an artist, is your ability to edit all the information that you see. So two people can see the same thing, but they'll edit it differently. So artists need to learn to take charge of that and not be afraid. Don't be afraid what's wrong. Make the decision. If you make a decision, it's always correct. And that's one of the things that I really preach and talk about, and I really believe that. If you make a decision, it's your decision. It's always correct. It's when you are afraid to make a decision and don't do it, that's when it's not art.
Yeah.
It shows up in your painting. So, if you want the sky yellow, make it yellow, and then go from there. See what happens.
And oddly enough, simplicity then takes us back to our other conversation about seeing, and we had a whole conversation about Helen Keller and trying to see, like, if Helen Keller suddenly got her sight. And
right.
I think you remember that conversation that we had.
Yes.
You were reading the book with that. So then that takes us all the way back to, yeah, you can see, if you have really great eyesight, every leaf on a tree, but I don't want to paint every leaf on a tree. So
well, I think the realization I had from reading that Helen Keller book is, I imagine what would happen if she gained her sight after all those years of not knowing. She didn't have a language at the time. She didn't have any words in her head. So if she opened her eyes, she wouldn't know what a leaf was. She wouldn't know what a tree was. She wouldn't even know what a face was. There would just be
what
shapes
color
and
it was.
values and color. Yeah, well, what the colors mean. But we are impaired, really, by carrying around in our head the idea of a leaf, the idea of a face. And what painting has taught me is that I have to unlearn all of that. I have to see it purely abstractly as shapes, values, color. Regardless, I know what a leaf is, but I don't need to say leaf. You know what I mean? So so with Helen Keller, she didn't even have a choice to say leaf. She didn't know what it was. So that's what painting is. It's becoming Helen Keller again, so that you see purely visually. Of course, we have associations on a very personal level, each one of us, with certain kinds of leaves, certain kind of landscapes, certain kind of faces. That is individual, but that's all it is individual. The universal is in the color and the abstraction of those things coming together. And so, we to me, that's the interesting thing, is artists get to share their, like Rembrandt and the people that he painted on his self-portraits. I don't know this man, but you can love him, or like Andrew Wyatt, who paints. He's one of my favorite artists in the world. He is so deeply in touch with what he paints. But when he paints it, it becomes these powerfully abstract paintings. It's so wonderfully executed that you don't care what this is. I don't even care what the story is. You feel it.
There was one that I think it was Wyatt, that you posted on your Facebook page that was pretty much just all umbers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's one that you saw in the was it the National Gallery in DC or somewhere in DC?
Yes, it's one of my favorite paintings in the world. It's just a little water trough with a water pail on it, with a window looking out into a pasture with some cows beyond it, and it is just beautiful values, texture, but boy, you can feel the passage of time. Even though I don't know how to explain it. No other artist can do it. I don't know of any other artist who can do it so effortlessly and still get you to feel exactly how he felt about
the energy is just gorgeous with that.
It's incredible. But there's no color. There's just brown. Yeah, what a great example. I didn't even think about that. It is. It's really just umbers and black. But that was a watercolor study that he later did egg tempera of. And the man was relentless. He just did whatever it took to get the idea across. And you look at that painting and you can hear it, which is astounding, to me.
Right. I was just going to say, you know, if black and white doesn't really turn you on to use black and white, you can actually use any value scale of umber or
Hmm.
any particular, you pick a color and make a value scale out of it and use those. You know, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to be a black to white value scale, right?
That's right. Yeah, but you know, the black allows you to go really
Further.
deep with the value. So yeah,
Right.
you want to get your darkest darks in there, and you know, for certain direct painters will like, you know, they kind of shun from black.
Mm-hmm.
I actually love black, and if you see Andrew Zorn
Mm-hmm.
painted, he couldn't do that without black.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's a silly thing, really.
So, I want you to talk about the one picture that or painting that we're looking at of yours right now. It's the ballerina with
Oh
the
yes.
golds and the blues and.
Yeah, so here's a painting I did way before I ever played with glazing. And had I known about glazing, this painting would have been in some way a lot easier and maybe even a little bit richer in color, a little more variety in color. But this was an assignment I gave myself. Talk about simplicity. Um, I gave myself an assignment to say, what can you do with the color yellow? Can you do a complete rich painting, finished painting with just yellows and using some harmonies of whatever? So I used a little black, a little blue, um, but really relied on values, and the edges in this painting really worked out well for me. So there's just really good drawing, just a little shadow on that on the dress as it hangs on the shoulder, and
Mm-hmm.
just that curve of the neck, you know,
Mm-hmm.
and just the little sharp edges here and there. And the painting was only 20 by 20, and I just finished it, laid it on the ground, and still wet. And somebody walked into my studio and bought it right off. And I wish I still had it because I really like this piece.
Yeah.
But with this, glazing would have been, just think about it. I could have done this painting without even worrying about yellow at the top. I
Mm-hmm.
would just paint with whatever, mostly values, whites and grays, and a little bit of touch of yellow. Then afterwards, I could glaze the yellows on top. I could go thick yellow, thick, you know, thick paint as well as thin glazes, and play with it in a million different ways. So it could have been greenish yellow, it could have been orangish yellow, it could have been purplish yellow, it could have been grayish yellow. You see what I mean? It's
Mm-hmm.
endless, the variety of things that I could have done with this one. But here's a case of direct painting. Um, so now that we look at it, maybe I have to try it again and
I was gonna
take
say,
this.
it's nothing stopping you from doing it your new
Yeah.
way.
Yes, well, sometimes it's like, you know, listen, you think about Beethoven, who wrote these incredible orchestra pieces and some piano concertos. So he's written it down, the structure's there. Now any musician can take that and play it and you know play it in their own way. So with my paintings, if I come up on a good structure like this, but I like the layout, what the edges are doing, then it's like a piece of music that's already written out for me. Now I can take it and reinterpret it my own way, you know, in a
Mm-hmm.
different way. So yes, it's not out of the realm of possibility that I'll take an idea and do it two or three different ways.
Okay. Juan, I don't know, is there anything else that you might want to talk about with simplicity that we haven't touched on? And I also want to encourage our listeners that if they have any questions, now would be a great time
Sure.
for you to start typing those in for us.
Hmm.
Sarah just pulled up what I did here is this is one of my favorite Fetchin paintings. It's the girl holding peaches.
Oh
And
yes.
I took that, um, the color one, and then I turned it into black and white, which is what I typically do when I look at a master painting, just so I can understand how they're using their values and setting up their value plans with it. So, and
Well,
try to learn from it.
well, I can tell you, I don't think Feshin was one who did very much glazing. He mystifies me what he did. He's so good. He
Yeah.
just has a way of just his edges and his, but it doesn't matter how much paint he uses, his drawing is always so beautiful, and they go right along with, if you just see his black and white drawings.
Mhm.
his paintings feel just like those black and white drawings. So that just tells you it still comes back to shape. That has to be the most important thing. And
Yeah.
then his values and edges are just fantastic. So yeah, if you take any of his paintings and Xerox them in black and white, you'll see that his structure of those two or three value shapes are incredible. They're really he knew exactly what belonged to what. You know, any color he puts down, any values he puts down, he understands where that belongs to what in the structural way, you know, in the
Mhm.
structure or nature of the painting.
Yeah. Yeah. It's amazing. And it's, seeing his work up close, I naturally with working with Kevin McPherson and different folks, I've been out to Taos a number of times, and the Fetchin House is there, and we would go through and look at his paintings. So there's a lot of his that I got to look up, very close at, and it just amazes me. Edges are so hard to grasp, if you will,
Yes.
and can be so elusive, and yet, he makes it look so easy. And I'm wondering, is it one of these things where I've heard people say, I'd come up and I would say, soften this edge over here, and it's like, well, I'm afraid if I do that, then I'll lose this, whatever it is they're trying to keep. And I'm like sitting there looking at them going, but my eye stops there, and it's not supposed to stop there. So,
Yeah.
it's like there's that, it's fear again. And I, how much time do you really, I guess the question is, if you say, gosh, I'm afraid I'm going to lose that edge over there, do you go ahead and lose it? You could
Oh
always bring it
yeah.
back, right?
Oh
So,
yeah, you can always bring it back. No, I'm never afraid to lose an edge because if I know my shape, I can always bring the shape back. So it's not that I can tell you the easiest way, the simplest way for me to explain edges and how to see edges is to look at what you're painting as if you're driving by really fast. Just glance over at it for 1 second and move and turn your head away. What did you just see?
yeah.
So what if you glance over and turn back, just notice what you so you have to pull your eye back and look at the entire scene that you're painting. Not one spot in the painting, but the entire scene that you're painting, edge to edge to edge to edge, and
Mhm.
then turn away. You'll notice when you do that what will really be obvious, and anything else that is not obvious is eligible for a soft edge.
Right.
You see what I mean? I
Uh-huh.
mean, but what the artists make the mistake of looking at one spot, and when they do that, then the spot will inevitably become sharp.
Right.
And so the important thing to remember is when you glance back, look at the entire scene that you're painting, like what's on your canvas, edge to edge, and notice what you see first. You know, what stands out to you first.
Mhm.
And that's where your sharp edges usually should be. Even that can change, but ultimately that will tell you the different hierarchies of what you saw, what you didn't see, and then some things that you can't see at all when you do that, you don't need any edges there at all.
Right. Right. And if I look at the fetching that's in front of us, all of the soft edges are below her face, where we're automatically going to go and look anyway.
Yeah.
So he has softened everything except for one hand, if you will, that's holding a peach. And again, this is my opinion, and her face,
Hmm.
which the name of the painting is Girl Holding Peaches. So
He
makes
pretty
sense
much
to me.
softens everything and leads you to where he wants you to look. I mean,
Exactly.
that's the power of, yeah. And
Yeah.
that's the
So,
thing, you know. In ultimately, the fun thing with edges is like writing a piece of music. You
mm-hmm.
accent where you want something accented, and you let the other pieces flow into one another. And then if you don't do that intentionally, I mean, I do that intentionally to guide the eye through a painting.
Right.
So where my soft and sharps are very intentional,
Okay.
and it's part of the rhythm. It creates rhythm in a painting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Sarah, go back to the one that we started out with, the lady that was kind of suspended up in the air. because there's not that one, that one. Yeah. Quan, we had a discussion with Joanna Arnett and talked a little bit about golden mean or the rule of thirds and things like that. And there's this gorgeous piece of light on, if you look to the left of the painting, you see their dark arm, and then there's this gorgeous piece of light on this material that's sitting there. Did you intentionally do that there? Because
yes. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to talk a little bit about that. So
yes, that piece of light, which is the only piece of light floating inside of that entire shadow, so it brings the light into the shadow. Whereas the other side, there's shadow in the light already, but that little piece of light brings it. So if you cover that up with your hand, it would still work, and in fact, that piece could be even smaller, but I saw that when I was painting this, and I'm obviously, this is done from photography. I use the photograph as my third eye pretty much. It's a note-taking tool, and obviously I'm not following any of the colors in the photograph. That doesn't matter to me at all.
Right.
So I use it for just certain things. In fact, this figure was floating in water. So I did it. I took the water out because I didn't. At first, I was trying to incorporate that as part of this painting, but I realized what I'm interested in is the idea of what would happen if you forgot that you were a body and you don't feel your body. And so this is just the beginning of a big series that I'm going to have so much fun playing with.
Right. I'm going to send you a link to someone. I'm not going to mention their name on the air, to someone's work for you to look at, and we can have a separate conversation about that. But I think you'll be interested in their work. Yeah, some of the work that he did. And I'll send that to you privately.
I may or may not want to look at any of the things. The reason why is I want to come at this my own way and not be influenced by anything yet. When I'm far enough along, I'll call you.
Okay, that'll work because I think you'll be interested in seeing it. I also don't want it to influence you. So let me know when you're ready to look at it, and I'll send it to you. So
literally, I already have like 10 different approaches to this series of paintings, 10 different ways that I've done it, and they're I'm not quite there yet. It's a long ways from it.
Yeah, well, just drop me a note when you're ready, and I'll send it to you because I really do not want to influence you. So
okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah. So we are. I think we pretty much covered simplicity. Any other comments you want to make, Quang?
I just want to encourage artists to explore. Really, just to don't worry about all these rules and regulations and how to do it right and what's wrong and all of that. There isn't any right or wrong other than what you decide in the end. There certainly is good drawing, good control of values, and understanding edges. If you're an atmospheric painter, if you're a graphic painter, edges doesn't even matter. So there is great art in the ability to handle those things. And then there is understanding to be gained from looking into composition and why put this here, why put that there. But I really believe my definition of great art or true art is that it's a byproduct of your search for what is true, and anything that you do along the way with an honest quality of searching is art. It doesn't matter how much a beginner you are, or how expert of a painter you are, because we'll see out there's so much art that is being done for the marketplace. People worrying about what will sell, which they're always wrong about. Who will like what's and those works tend to be tedious and predictable, really, and I know really, really terrific artists who've fallen into this trap of painting for the marketplace, and they've all suffered for it, and they, so I just want, doesn't matter where you are as an artist, practice your drawing and values. That's like playing your scales, practicing your scales on the piano, but start exploring them on a level that is personal. And I hope that this glazing process thing here will help you in two ways. One, to focus further on the values and the drawing, and feel light about color, don't worry about it. And then let that dry and explore what you can do with that on there. And then after that, it will help you with your direct painting. If you're a direct painter anyway, you're going to get better, I mean, immediately. Already I felt like doing this has helped me to see with my normal approach to painting anyway. You can't help it.
Yep. Sarah's now showing the one that was part of your show, the Western show that you did, I think, in Denver, was it?
Yes,
the horses?
Yeah. Yeah. Talk about simplicity. I was invited, I've never really painted horses before. And I was invited to stay at a ranch in Wyoming for a week, and with 4 or 5 other really terrific painters. And the whole intention was that we're going to go hang out and paint the landscape. Well, I wandered down to the corral and saw the horses, and I spent the entire week with the horses. I thought they were so beautiful. In fact, you notice I painted out the landscape around the horses.
Yeah.
So, they became this little conference of horses here. They just kind of, the shapes are so beautiful. It reminded me of the ballet dancers that I was working with in Colorado. The forms were exquisite. And, it allows me this painting was so much fun. You can see there's a few horses in the back that is almost ghosted out. They were at one point as dark as these other ones here. And so this is before my glazing thing, but in fact, I was sort of glazing with thick paint.
Yeah.
So, I would actually paint the painting and scrape it all off and then put back what I want in there and then keep pulling paint together and stuff. So it has a feeling of glazing, of translucent layers and stuff. But yeah, so I could glaze on top of these guys now too.
Actually, looking at your paintings, I just get this sense of fun that you have when you're doing this, that it just comes through. It's like, oh, that looks like a fun one to paint. I personally would never do a foreshortened horse, but good for you. So,
well, I can tell you, if it's not fun, I won't do it. I'm not going to do it. That's the thing. I'm so excited to get up in the morning to go at it, and I have to weed through all this other stuff before I can get in front of my easel. And sometimes it's like 3 in the afternoon, like, oh my gosh, what happened? But once I get an idea like this, and I want to keep painting this until the whole thing disappears, and but it won't. The shapes will still be there, but it would be so beautiful to see. But that takes time, and deadlines and things just totally get in the way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I know. And you're so gracious to talk with us today. And Sarah, I'm going to check with you. Are any questions coming through that we need to ask?
Yeah, we do have a few here.
Great.
Alex is asking, so how exactly do you glaze, and can you glaze in plein air?
No, you can't really glaze in plein air because glazing is a process of the underneath layer has to be dried. So unless you can paint an acrylic painting, in plein air and then glaze over it with oil, you can do that, but glazing, how I glaze is, again, I do this very tonal painting underneath, very as far as I can take it, as finished as I can take it. The more finished, the more beautifully detailed, the easier it is to glaze on top and get the result right away. So I let that dry, and then what I do is I take my normal palette, and I would mix the color that I want, but what I'm finding out, the old masters do, is they use a lot of like yellow ochre, raw umbers, black, and they would literally, and some reds, Venetian red or whatever, and they'll take the Venetian red, which is, some of those colors are translucent type of oils, and they'll mix it into the glazing medium, and and then they wash it over an entire area, and then they go back with some white, and they mix in with some of that color and bring back the highlights. What I've done is I've glazed in an area with the color I want, and then wipe away the highlights again. So you can do it that way, or you can paint the highlight thick on top of that glaze, let that dry, and bring that back if you want. So it's just a process of, like I said, I've done 30 of them just to find out what I can do and what I can't do, and I still haven't gotten it right. It's just that you can do whatever. It's a wonderful thing to play with. And so you have to set out with very specific exercises to find out what you can do with it.
It's really kind of interesting too, because when you do this and it's so right, it's so beautiful that you almost don't want to add color to it. It's like, oh, it's done. Yeah.
Well, you can make that decision too. But
Yeah, I've done that actually. I have a number of them just as a reminder of, in my studio.
Yeah, but you can always wipe it off, play glazes on it, and then wipe it off. See?
Yeah, I can.
You can have your cake and eat it too.
Business Quan saying, get rid of that fear, Linda.
Don't hang on. That's it. Yeah.
All right.
Learn.
Thank you. We have a few more questions here. Carlene asks, can you talk about the process of laying colors on top of the black and white stage? I have found that my black and white stage may look powerful, but as soon as I try to lay colors, the oomph goes out of the painting.
Okay. Well, you're going to have to find a way to lay it down so that the oomph doesn't go away on top of it. A lot of times the black and white, when I lay color over the light area, when I glaze the color over the light area, I'm finding that those layers need very little color, very little pigment, So if your values are really beautiful in the light area, you can glaze sometimes just a thin layer of different variety of chroma, and you'll see the color will change. And remember that colors will gradate. If you look at any one person's color skin tone, it doesn't stay the same color all the way through. It changes from warms to cools. You can do that with the glazing too. So I keep it very thin. In the shadow areas, if your value's correct there too, you can glaze on top of it. It's going to go a little bit darker, but if you use too much of opaque pigments, you can cover that up too. So it really depends on the effect that you want. I mean, I've done an entire shadow. When I glaze on it, I glaze opaque enough that it doesn't change. It'll change the value slightly, It'll cover up the grayness of the shadow. It'll warm it up. It doesn't take much to warm up a little color, to warm up a black area or a gray area with just a little hint of color. So I think it's a process of discovering, and so different layering, different thicknesses and translucent quality in their opaqueness and translucency is what I'm trying to say, is something you need to figure out, to try out. And high chroma, try to throw in what happens if you give it a little bit more chroma than normal, with a lot of translucency. And remember, you can work into those areas even after you have this black and white thing. You can, during this glazing process, you can use more direct paint color right on top of those areas, keeping the values very similar, and you're going to be fine. So you can add back to all of that. It's not a one-shot deal. You can really play with that.
Okay. Yeah, it's very important to keep to that value that you have in your black and white. Because
yes.
What I typically see is that when it's lost its oomph is when I've gone away from the value that I had under it, with the black and white. So I have a red square that we use in my classes, and whenever we get into a value discussion, I pull the red square out and say it never lies. I just hand it to them and they look and they're like, oh, I hate when you're right. But that's exactly it, is it never lies.
Yeah.
Your eyes can lie.
Yeah.
So.
Those values, those pesky old values.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's see here. Moving on. Judy asks, how can I get more varied edges? I use flats and always get too sharp edges, even with bristle filberts. I'm not sure what that is. My edges are not soft.
Edges is a wonderful thing to play with. I've seen people, my friend Dan Sprick, who's a wonderful painter, he uses a fan brush to get some edges. Sargent got soft edges by painting one value next to another and just sort of pulling it together. You can do it with your hand, your thumb. You can do it with a thick brush, with a thin brush, with a palette knife, with
paper towel.
You could, yeah. I mean, C.W. Mundy had this wonderful way of flickering a towel across his painting and pulling edges together. So, what I like to do with edges is set yourself up an assignment to paint exploring edges, in which you say anything goes. Is that right? So you say in this painting, I'm going to keep one really important, maybe two really important sharp edges. That defines what I need to define. The rest of it can go, and I'm going to do whatever, I'm going to play. I'm going to try a soft brush. I'm going to try a long filbert brush. I don't use flats. I don't particularly like flat brushes. I use, this is just for me, but I use, I like the filberts, the longer filberts. And when I make an edge, it's usually when I'm really on, I'm just painting one shape into another as naturally. I don't even think about it. I see a soft edge, I paint a soft edge. I don't see how I'm going to do it. And the important thing about soft edges, or edges in general, just like color or tones or texture, is that variety is what gives you richness. So, you look at the horse painting here, there are just really sharp edges, really soft edges, and everything else in between. So it's the everything else in between that is important, leading up to the very sharpest ones and the softest ones, you see? But how do you do it in such a way that you can always tell where your shape is? So if you had to take a pair of scissors and cut out your beautiful drawing, you can still do that. So the edges have to be subservient to that. Even when, if you look at my horse painting, the one in the back, in the middle, his back is gone, but I can still see the shape of his back going back to the rump. I can cut that out with a pair of scissors if I had to, but it's really super soft. The only way you're going to learn about edges is to do a painting that you say, I'm going to play with edges, and I don't care what happens to this painting. I'm going to be playing with edges and find out what it means to me. I can't encourage that enough. How much fun is that, to give yourself an assignment like that anyway?
Yeah.
Which means you can do whatever color you want, whatever values you want. The only thing that's important is edges.
Yep.
And even paint quality. Throw paint quality in there. Go thick, go thin, play with it.
Thank you. I'm not really sure what she means by this question, but maybe you guys will know a little better than I do. But Joan is asking, can you give us some advice on how to transition from value to color?
Yes, I think this whole program has been about that, really. The transition from value to color is that color is always secondary to value. Think of it this way. Shape is the most important thing in painting, and shape is the same as drawing. If you don't have a shape, what value are you going to put in it? Let's say you have two values in mind. Those values will have to go into some kind of shape, right? So you got to have the shape first, then you can assign it value. Once you see the values that you like, then you can assign those values color. Otherwise, you can't do it the opposite. If you see a color and you don't understand value, then you're kind of at a loss to how that's going to work together. And then once you see the value, then it goes into shape. So the transition is that you have to understand your shapes and your values really well. And once you see the value, then you can mix colors. You can mix 1 million colors within one value, So it forces you to learn how to mix a color within the context of a value. And that's where you learn about your colors.
Yeah.
Okay, kind of piggybacking on that, another quick question here about value. Alex says, portraits and still lifes, the artist controls simple values. However, rarely does a landscape have simple value shapes. How do you deal with that situation? Keep looking for ideal values or forced values?
Oh, I totally disagree on that. I think that in a landscape is where I see the simplest values.
Yep.
In fact, in a landscape, I can usually bring it down to the structure of the values much quicker than I can in a still life in a studio. Usually in a landscape it's a little bit more graphic. It may be the sky against the entire landscape below it as one structure, or it may be the sky against the landscape below it with a row of shadowy dark trees, or the shape of a river, or in the case of a snow painting, it might be the sky and the snow is the same value, and then the shadow of the snow is a different value. But I can usually find the structure of a landscape much quicker. It's there. You just have to look for it. And each case is different. Every situation is different. But underlying each landscape that you stand in front of, surely there is a simple structure, and that's what you got to find, and that's what you have to understand before you can paint. With the still life, it's different. When I paint from north light, as I do in the studio, the shadows are softer, but I still look for patterns of lights and darks and things that flow through it.
Yep.
Cool, thank you. Well, this was very inspirational and informative, and thank you guys. We're getting a lot of thank yous coming in. I'm reading a few of them.
Oh, good.
Good.
That was fun.
Yeah.
Actually, we almost went 1.5 hours. Holy smoke.
Yeah, we have actually. So
I
thank
think
you
we got
so
to
much.
most of the questions as well. I'm looking through them just to make sure I didn't miss any, but I think we got to most of the questions. So if we weren't able to answer your question, you guys, you will get an email from GoToWebinar within the next hour, and if you reply to that, I can pass the questions on to Linda and Quang for you. And also, any feedback we'd appreciate there. And just a reminder, as a special thank you for joining us, you can save 10% at northlightshop.com. And the coupon code for that is ArtChats10. And also the recording from today will be up on artistnetwork.com/art-chats. And there you will also find Linda's previous art chats, as well as links to upcoming art chats. So Linda, do you want to tell us a little bit about what you have coming up next?
Yeah, our next one, I got a couple emails from some folks that have been listening, I guess, for a while now, even before when it was part of Artist Mentors Online, and wanted to know why I haven't done anything on the business side of art, which I actually made a conscious decision that I wasn't going to do anything on the business side of art, that we would actually focus on art skills. But I've since made a really wonderful contact, a gentleman by the name of Daniel Brown, who has a wonderful resume, 35 years being an art advisor, also being an art critic. He's been on the board of the Cincinnati Contemporary Art Center, and I think he's also been on the Cincinnati Art Museum's board as well. I may be misspeaking there, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, Daniel and I have gotten into a number of conversations, and we are on June 13th going to host a show and talk about gallery representation and basically a lot of Daniel's knowledge is, he also has curated shows, so a lot of Daniel's knowledge will be about what kind of gallery should you be looking for at certain stages in your art career, and the differences between certain galleries, and basically we're going to center the show on the art gallery thing. So if you're interested around hearing about art galleries and developing a relationship with them and different things like that, tune in on June 13th, because that's what we'll be talking about.
Okay, thank you. And Quang, where can people find out more info about you? Do you want to share your website or?
I haven't thought about that. Well, yes, my website is just quangho.com, and
Okay.
on there, actually, speaking of landscape, I've been trying to do a fourth video. I've got 3 out right now. One is called Nuts and Bolts, which is everything I know about painting, and then one is painting the still life in light and shadow, which and you can find all this on my website. And the third one is painting the figure using local tones, which is different than light and shadow. And then the next one I want to do is a series of a couple of landscape videos, and this will answer that question. I think it was Alex that asked that a little bit better, how I look for the simple pattern and what the structure, how to see a landscape and do it. And so that's my next thing. One is in obviously shadow and light, and what do you do when the clouds come over? And you have a completely different kind of painting. So there'll be 2 types of landscape paintings to deal with. And then I'll probably I've had requests to do a nude figure type of painting and a portrait. So that's in the works somewhere down the line.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. And I think other than that, I don't know what else there is that's going on. I'm kind of just, most of the time I'm hiding in my studio so I can paint. But I really enjoyed it. Thank you for the interview.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for your
Thank you.
time, and thank you, Linda, as always. And on behalf of everyone who attended, they're all sending in their thanks, so I'll pass that on to you guys. Thank you from
Thank you.
from all of the guests, and thank you guys for being here. So we'll go ahead and
Yeah.
wrap this up, and we will see you at the next one, Linda.
Okay, yes, share generously. Let everybody know that the talk was good and that you learned a lot from it, and so share the links as soon as they're available.
Yes.
We would appreciate that. So, and thank you so much also for taking time out of your day, everybody out there, and listening to us today.
Absolutely.
And Quan, again, thank you. You know, you're one of my favorite guys. So
Thank you. We'll play golf one of these days.
Yes, we will, and then we'll paint afterwards.
Well, we'll play golf one of these days.
Okay, we'll paint on a different day.
I'm going on vacation. I'm not going there, but okay.
Okay, yeah, that'll work. Yep.
Take care.
You guys are fun.
too.
Have a good one. Bye, guys.
You too. Take care.
Bye, everyone.